So hello everyone. This is the second edition, I think it is, of Stormgate Snapshots. Last time we talked with Chris Culp Fiction, about ruination and the process of new map design. But I am very excited to have a pretty cool guest here for our second one. We got Alan Dilling, the new art director of Stormgate, who is I think actually there's a video going live right around the same time this video goes about deep dive into some of the concept art. So new art direction, new interesting things. But before we get into some of that, Alan, you've been in the game industry for a long time. You're new to Frost Giant. I was wondering if you could take a moment and talk about that journey from, well, what you were doing beforehand, how that comes into Frost Giant, and just kind of that introduce us a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be on here and talking to everybody. So my career is in pretty one note. I started, actually, it was at 3D Realms in Texas like a long time ago after Duke Nukem came out, like the old school one. And then I worked on Duke Nukem forever, and I decided to leave because it was gonna take a long time, and it took like 15 years longer than I thought it would when I left. And so I ended up going to Blizzard, and that's where I spent almost my entire career. I was there 25 years. And then I left last year, and then I knew Tim and I knew a lot of the crew here, so it was a good fit just to come on in, and here I am. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so it was your your RTS start was Warcraft 3, right? From what I was taking a look at, or was there something beforehand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Warcraft 3 was great. So that was an awesome game. We had so much fun because we were building up the whole universe. I mean, everything that World of Warcraft had was based on the four races and all the world building and exposition we did on Warcraft 3. So that was we didn't know we were planting seeds for something much bigger later on, but Warcraft 3 was a blast. It was our first 3D game at the company, and so I came in with some 3D knowledge, so that was helpful, and we just had a good time. I mean, back then it wasn't about detail and fidelity so much. It was just like cool ideas, and just you couldn't do a whole lot with graphics at that point anyway, so it wouldn't matter how many polys the guy's foot was. I mean, it was just more like, how do you make it cool and rad? Just have a fun experience for the players.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, kind of going off of that a little bit, because so were you on the ground floor with Warcraft, or did you kind of come into that after it had already gotten started?
I came in right at the beginning when there's doing prototypes, like visual prototypes, and then I remember talking to my art director Sam Didier, and I was like making the elf, and I was like, "This is pretty cool." And I'm like, "This is the style you want?" He's like, "Make him wider." I'm like, "Oh, he's like twice as wide." I'm like, "This guy's crazy," but that's the style. And so after a while, that's in my blood, got integrated into it, and you realize there's a lot of subtle things with RTS art direction and just rules, so to speak, of like how to make things look good from that camera angle, because it's not the same as Call of Duty, obviously. And so readability, unit size, team color, all these things are like kind of get pounded in your brain. So it's this second nature now.
Yeah, actually, so that's awesome. But I guess the reason I'm asking that question is, you came into Frost Giant with what 3-4 years of art development of development of the game coming to this point, and you're the new art director. You're having to go and take a look at this established art design a little bit and start to put your own stamp on that. Whereas, you talked about Warcraft 3, that's something that you come in on the ground floor, and yeah, you got Samwise Didier over you as your art director. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of coming into something where there is already some visual language set up here versus, being one of those people that is shaping that art language from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, it's very different, and it's there's a lot of advantages. It kind of goes both ways. There's already parameters set upon you, so we can't start from scratch, which we don't want to. There's good bones here, and I think it's just more like pivoting and figuring out the tonal differences we want. But it's also much easier than just in some ways, production wise, than having a blank canvas and seeing like, you just do whatever the hell you want, because that takes a long time to figure out what that is. And I think oftentimes games, especially new companies, they can do anything they want, and so it's like all over the place from here. And then it's easier for me to be like, hey, within these parameters, let's already take what's established and add to it and refine it. And tonally, we're going a little more hardcore, a little more sci fantasy than sci-fi and sci fantasy. We're gonna make it a little more serious, a little more tonally edgy, and a little darker than I think we previously released. And so, as you can see here, some of the concepts we're trying to do that more with the Infernals, especially because they're space demons, right? So let's make them a little more scary and intimidating, and just more demonic. And so it's been a challenge, but super fun. The crew here is great, and I think the hardest thing is just trying to organize everything for the scheduling. We're so much time out now, and now we just went over the schedule yesterday. We're trying to figure out how many slots of the new style we can put in versus ones we have to tweak enough to look cohesive with it, because we can't redo everything. And so that's the biggest thing, is it's a time management and organizational challenge at this point for the most part. I think we have a good view and direction where we want to go with the three races, especially the Vanguard and the Infernals, but it's more about how we can achieve what we want to do in the time allowed with good quality and hit all our needs. So
Yeah, certainly. And actually, I'm really curious about that process because you talked about, okay, we only have so much time. We cannot go over every single unit, both I guess units that have already been that the public has seen. I'm sure there are plenty of units that are that there is art that just we haven't seen just yet that are in some level of development. And you can't change every single one. So what does that triaging process look like when you come in? You've been in here for a couple months now, and you have to go look at every single unit and every single bit of art and say, okay, this we have to change, this we want to totally redo, this we're just going to change a little bit. What is that process, and how do you make those decisions?
that's a good question. It's a combination of things. Like, when I first came in here, there was a lot of talk about what the community was passionate about changing, if you want to put it that way. And so we definitely looked at that stuff, and I firmly believe that if we all dig it and we have time to do what we want to do with the direction, and we all like it internally, the fans are going to respond well to it. So it's a combination of listening to them, and there was a couple of big items on that list that were kind of above beyond everything else. And so I'm like, okay, there's definitely a reason for that. And I look at it like, yes, I agree totally. Let's just change that one up. And so it's kind of a combination of lower tier units, because you can see them more often, so they represent the game more often, more, even though they're smaller size to showcase the art. They're just, you see them all the time. And I think there's some things I just like. I don't like that unit at all, just because XYZ, or I have a strong vision, or one of our guys has a strong vision for a certain spin on them. And so we kind of put it through all these filters and then see what we can actually achieve and how much stuff we have time to get done. And like, we just came into a situation where I wanted to change this one unit, but the new silhouette was very similar to an older unit that we weren't going to change. And so we had to figure out how that domino effect happens. And then, like, how does it check with the schedule? Because it's not trivial to make a new unit. And so like, here's the Warhog right here. So this is something that the community was definitely had feedback about, and I agree. So we change it up, and it's much cooler now. And I think, and I'm just showing you a small snippet here, but we're changing quite a bit. And again, we put them in a few buckets of like concept from scratch, assuming design is the same and everything. We work hand in hand with them. And then the other ones, which is like, okay, we need to make this one look like this one, but we don't have time to make it from scratch. So a lot of it is retexturing, a little bit of geo work, changing the effects, things like that. And that's our kind of a second quicker bucket, which still takes not trivial time. But last thing I want to do is like, hey, here's 4 new units that look great, and everything else looks like the same. And it's not because it's good or bad, just we want it to feel like a cohesive product. So we're super excited to get this stuff out to the fans and see. It's going to take a little while to get it where we want to be.
Yeah, actually, that raises a follow-up question, because you're talking about timelines, right? About how something, you can only work on so many things. You got to get it out to everyone. What is because this concept art looks great. I'm really excited about although the engineer in me is a little mad at the spherical wheels, but what's cool is cool, at the end of the day. But what is that, like, the concept art looks good. And when we look at, you take a concept art and it goes into a 3D render, it goes in the game, it never looks totally the same. Maybe it's cooler, maybe it's not as cool, but it is a little different. What is, I'm not going to ask you if we're going to get this 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, but what is that timeline, or that process line look like coming from, okay, I got a concept art of a really cool hedgehog, a really cool new design that I like, to it actually getting put and getting ready and playable?
It varies case to case, but generally speaking, like, I came up with an idea for the main look of the body before it transforms. And then I kicked it over to one of our awesome concept artists. Probably about 2 weeks, we go back and iterate on a lot of different ideas, and I definitely wanted the round wheels. I mean, it's funny, a side note, I've never seen this anime, like, it was like 10, I don't know what it was. It was like this hover bike, or a bike with the spherical wheels. I'm like, and then I wanted some excuse to use that forever, on StarCraft, and I was like, no, it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, and now we got it. And I come here, we talk about the Vanguard Hedgehog, And they're like, it has spherical wheels, but they were just so small you couldn't tell. It's like, okay, let's amp them up and double down on that. But so we had this one took a little longer to concept because we had to figure out how it transformed.
Mhm.
And so that took about 2 weeks, and then we model it, and that is about 3 weeks. It's a little quicker for mechanical things, and it's a high poly sculpt, model it, texture it, and then it's about 2 weeks to 3 weeks to animate something, and then of course effects, which it depends on what it is, but that's another week or two, and it's not a linear flow like that. Like the effects can come later or beforehand, but that's why it takes a good amount of time to change anything. And if you're doing something more like a hero character, like a Mars, and then that's longer because you're doing more cinematic level quality, a little more detail in the face, things like that. Organic stuff's a little bit longer in general than hard surface, depending on what it is. But it's in general, it takes about 3 weeks to model a unit, texture it, 4 sometimes, and then depends on what it animates. It takes 2 or 3 weeks easy. If it's something like a flying vehicle, like the helicarrier, that's much easier because there's not a whole lot of animation, right? So you save time with that stuff, and it's not complex because it doesn't have limbs, and so it kind of goes up and down, ebbs and flows, depends on what it is. So as we're trying to make the schedule, we're trying to figure out like, hey, we have 2 more weeks here before we release, or this before a certain release. Okay, let's swap this around, put the one we can do in a week and a half here, and then the one takes 6 weeks to go somewhere else, and it's a big Jenga puzzle, you know, uh, balancing act to get all that together. And half my job is just trying to organize stuff like that and get everybody on the same page, um, besides just the art direction. So yeah, that's the long-winded answer of why it takes so long. It's I think sometimes fans don't, and I love their passion. I used to be like this, but like, how can we just change that thing? It's like there's lots of reasons. Like, if we could change that quick, we'd love to. And it's not that you have things ready to go, but they don't fit in with the release schedule, which takes time and manpower to just put out a new build and whatnot. So, and QA to make sure it's not buggy. Because I remember back in the day, I would try and sneak things out at Blizzard. Like, I stayed up all night making this cool thing, and they're like, "You want to break everything?" Like, no. And they're like, "Look at what your thing did." I'm like, "No, I broke it." And so you learn. But I think we have a great plan though. Now we just have to we're just digging in and executing it. We're working very hard for it, and I think we're super pumped up about what we're going to show to the fans.
Yeah, again, I'm really excited about some of the concept art where again, some of this is new. Some of this is we saw in the nice 90-minute video that came out a bit ago. So I'm very excited about some of the things that we're seeing. But going back to kind of a more macro level a little bit, because we have these rough thematic ideas, right, about the Infernals that are these extra dimensional invaders that give humans reason for having demon myth that, come in, come out. You got humans, scrappy humans. You have Celestials that are some sort of like quantum angel. We don't have a ton of lore about that public just yet, so not totally known. Um, when you think about these factions, the themes, and these ideas, is there anything that you found that is like really difficult to work around or to stick with or to work with? Or, what is the I guess what's the most interesting part of trying to work within these kind of different ideas?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things where I come in, I'm like, have a vision, I see something, and I'm like, as I'm learning what's here, more about the IP and everything, I'm like, oh, I'm getting cool ideas, and then they're like, well, that goes against, this XYZ thing. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that, and is it more bang for the buck? Does it move the meter more to retcon that? And because we're not out, my thing is we're not out at 1.0 yet. We have early access, and that's seen behind the curtain, but every game company, Blizzard, you see that early on in the process, you're going to see a lot of stuff that's not in the release at all, right? It's a very iterative process. And so, um, my philosophy right now is if it makes it cooler, makes the IP more engaging, and we love it more as fans and players, and we want people to keep coming back to this world for, you know, single player, multiplayer, whatever, then it's worth doing a little bit of what you might call retconning some stuff.
Mhm.
And so, it's not over till it's over kind of thing. And I want to make sure that we're building up and we're questioning things that again move the meter. And we have time to actually implement because there might be a lot of ideas like, oh, we can do this, and everyone's like, that's the best, and we're like, but that's impossible because we need tech and this and this. So
Yeah.
it's always a compromise, but I think we have a spin on some things for the campaign and definitely the factions that are going to be really well received by the public. And we just have to get into it now, and do it.
Talking about retconning, because we have the Gaunt up right now, and this new Gaunt that is a quadruped that looks like it might be a much bigger than the Gaunt that we have right now. Although sizing's not totally there. I'm just reading into things maybe.
It looks kind of gigantic for that angle, but it's actually it's still a small unit. It's tier 1, and it has the energy glaive on it. So it's the same attack, same gameplay as the previous Gaunt. Instead of throwing axes, it throws energy glaive, which I thought was a little more appropriate when you're fighting robots and space angels. But it's not that much bigger. It's a little longer, of course. But this is something we have to talk with design about, because we come up with the cool idea like, hey, like, is that the same pathing size? And I'm like, maybe. And so we make sure to get on the same page first, and we don't just work in a void and throw things over the fence. That's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, we're about to build this one right now. Actually, we have the high poly mesh of it right now, so we're trying to do texturing on it and then animate and get into the game. But again, it's a tier 1 unit, so you're going to see it a lot, and so it was something we wanted to really showcase the new approach to these guys.
Hey, I was going to ask the question of because on the one hand we talked about the art of the hedgehog might be a little harder because it has to transform. There are gameplay requirements that drive the art, and I was going to ask with the God here and it changing whether art ever drives gameplay. And
sometimes it does. I'm definitely. I always tell my crews we're game developers that do art. We're not just artists. We're not here to just make pretty art, and it's got to be a fun game. Art might get you into the game, but if it's not fun, it doesn't matter. So design is still the king. But that said, me and Tim Campbell work together, and I've worked together with people in the past where it's like, I have this cool idea for something, or they see a concept, they're like, what is that? I'm like, it's like a laser whip. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, well, how can we do that? I'm like, I don't know. Let's talk about it. And so we've had a couple the new units and new takes on the units have been a collaborative process between like design and art, which is fun because it's not like we're trying to control everything. It would be designers, but you visualize these things in your head. Like as soon as I start talking about the quadruped gaunt, I'm like thinking about how I'm visualizing in my head how it's fighting and how it's doing things, and like using the energy glaive as like a boomerang, and we're like, what if it did this and this, and then just kind of it just kind of explodes from there. And not everything works. Like you can have the best ideas in the world. There's not a real lack of good ideas. There's tons of ideas, but trying to get them to work correctly, or like maybe the designer's like, that's awesome. Did you see this other we have? It almost does the same thing. Like, true. Okay, that's a good point. So we don't have egos about it. We just try to make the best thing possible. But I think inspiration goes both ways. So.
Actually, I'm curious as well because we have the Gaunt up right now. I remember, and I don't have it up. I'll add it in editing. But there was a set of Infernal concept art from like 2 years ago that has a kind of a centaur-like being that's a little bit more mechanical, but it looks somewhat similar to this. Is when you look at how much of the new concept art you're designing is drawing inspiration from maybe some of the older concept art? How much of that is looking at external resources? Are there any are there any things that are giving you a lot of inspiration when you take a look at reconcepting these ideas?
There's nothing specific. I mean, I definitely looked through the old the cutting room floor, so to speak, of the concepts they didn't get the chance to use, and some of the ones that were actually concepted out, but they didn't translate it the way I would think from a concept. So I was like, hey, this is a good idea. What is this the same guy as that? And so that's also part of the pipeline of making sure that the spirit of the unit or the character comes through. But there's so many inspirations. Like I think going back to my old days of 3D Realms, there's Wayne Barlow is a fantasy painter, and he actually I think designed a lot of the avatar creatures, and he's got these books I've had for like 25 years of like just crazy alien art, and he had this one of hell. It was like this like his version of hell, and it was like crazy stuff and had these ruins and glyphs everywhere. And I'm like, oh, I remember that. I haven't looked at that book in like 15 years, so I go dig it out and like this is what I remembered at all. But the idea, it got me to that thinking of that the idea. So like my brain kind of took a different direction, but that helped inspire me. And then I think just these are well-known tropes, right? Archetypes of demons and angels, and so it's really hard to come up with something truly unique. It's more about how do we put a spin on them that's cohesive and helps. Again, it really helps the IP. I want to create an IP that is engaging, not just that has the cool art, but like we talked about from something minor, small point. We talked about the mask the god is wearing.
Yeah.
We have another character we're showing here with the mask, and we started. I was thinking about Spirited Away, and they have the guy with the mask on. I can't remember his name, and there's a couple other animes like that, just various shows. And like, what if it's kind of cool? They have this thing on, and it's kind of scary because you can't see. It's always mysterious. Like Squid Game's guy's got a mask on. Everything's Darth Vader. And like, what if something you have to earn your right to show your face, or vice versa, or something like that, right? And so, and maybe inside it's all Cthulhu or just a void or nothing, but it's this mysterious hierarchy of some sort. And so we started playing around with that. Like, she has a mask on right here, and maybe it's hard to tell what's going on, but we're just starting to figure out how to integrate that in so it kind of makes sense with the lore. And so that was the reason she's got the golden mask on. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's actually pretty cool. So when we talk about inspiration, right, and concepting and going all this, one of the big ideas behind Infernal lore is that, again, they've influenced this idea of human demon myth, whether that's Judeo-Christian demon myth, whether that's other things. But a lot of the current Infernal art does not really look like any classical demon. You take shape language, certainly you take colors from demons, but I'm not looking at any of these demons and saying, wow, that is that looks like a medieval Christian demon or whatever it is. Is that a conscious decision? Because again, I would kind of expect to see some of that based on, okay, this has influenced demon myth. Is that a conscious decision one way or the other? Or can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah. First, you mean regarding the current versions or the concepts here?
Yeah. Like the current versions concepts here, we don't really seem to see that big. Yeah. Okay, there's like very obvious parallels between current myth of things like maybe backwards goat hooves and horns and like all this devil. Stuff. The devil, or maybe onis, right? Japanese demons. Yeah. Things like that. We don't have that direct parallel, which I, based on what I understand of the lore, and this could be wrong, would expect to see some of that.
There is some of that. We're trying to lightly touch on the fact that they've been here before, and it's kind of a cool connection, but we're trying to, I think it's wise to stay away too much from direct religious comparisons too much, because it's it could get rub people the wrong way, but also it kind of limits you in some ways. But I like the idea of the vagueness of it. And again, it's something we can explore later on and find out how much we want to put a spin on it. Like, I first got here, I was thinking, like, what if there's a giant world that just goes around like the Death Star, and it's like, it's called Hell, and it's like, we got the Earth, they're like, it's hell. I'm like, sure, like,
good enough.
And yeah, something like that. We could do something like that, but that's not the direction we're going. But it's a tricky, slippery slope. I think the best thing to do is almost like the Spielberg Jaws thing. You just hint at it, and then your mind takes it a little further. And we ever come up with a good way where it intersects in a good way with the campaign and the story and the art, and we're like, oh, that's gonna make it to some better than the parts, that we can jump on it. But right now we're trying to do a little light hand with that stuff.
Gotcha. And of course, there's also this idea that the human, like a person, contextualizes what they see based on what they know. And big tech demons, if you're in the 1200s, you're not gonna conceptualize tech as tech. It's gonna be magic, right? Yeah. And you have all those ideas, and certainly generational drift is very much a thing. But I'm gonna go, and I'm going. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say one thing I was gonna say about the Infernals is I love this idea that they've been around for eons in the galaxy, and they're not just Hulk smash, like just typical fantasy medieval Halloweenish kind of element. And so I like the fact that they're well organized, and they have a civilization, and they're sophisticated in a way. They have almost this tech built on magic, and this kind of puzzle boxy Hellraisers element I keep playing around, like this one here. But they're still vicious and cutthroat and evil and like sadistic, just crazy. But they have a certain amount of hierarchy and a certain amount of civilization that's formed, right? That's why they have things that we're going to do some stuff with their structures that it's not just like bones and gold and chains and rocks and skulls and stuff like that, right? And it's more sophisticated, a deeper level than that because they're space demons, and I think we can explore that more, which I haven't really seen too much in other games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, this stuff looks pretty cool. I'm interested to see how this unit in particular looks at, because I know in that long interview you said, okay, it's going to be a hero unit, likely, maybe, but it's also going to be a spellcaster, like in 1v1. It's going to be potentially both. And again, that concept of this thing lugging a big cube around that you're putting keys into sounds, it's going to be interesting. I'm very.
Like that one,
Mhm.
yeah, that was a little more out there, and I was trying to think of something where it's like really outside the box. Sometimes
Yeah.
I give myself an exercise where, like, if I'm art director from this movie studio or this game,
Yeah,
and I'm like trying to make a game for a character for this other thing, which I usually don't do. I try and role play through that in my mind, and so she came out of that, and it's we call her Pandora just because the
Mhm.
temporary name for the
Box.
Pandora's box. And she basically floats on that thing.
Mhm.
So and so carrying around, it's like a couple feet off the ground or whatever, and she's on top of it with the big key. And whenever she goes to cast a spell, it kind of transforms and morphs, and she puts it down there, and then like unlocks it, and it does cool shape changes, and then massive cool stuff happens.
Yeah. But we're talking about tech things, and I know you are much further along in the Infernal process, a little bit further. You got the Vanguard stuff. We can see that right here. But there's been a lot of critique from the community about Celestials just being things with triangles. They're just triangles all over the place. I was wondering if you could give us some insight into how you're starting to look at reconceptualizing Cel. If you haven't gotten that far, the answer is we're just not there yet. That's totally fine. But I'm wondering if we can get any kind of insight into how you're approaching that.
We're kind of not there yet.
Okay.
It's more of a time thing. I mean, there's stuff I want to do with them that are kind of overarching things that will kind of tie them together a little bit. But yes, there's definitely some visual noise, I think, with them, and trying to get some show the case for identity in a more unique way, and also make the readability, especially when you have massive battles with units, not so busy. And like a good example is the scythe, the flyer. It's got triangle wings, and the fact that this is something simple, but they're just so far away from each other. You pull them in a little closer, and then unify the texture a little more, and then suddenly your eye kind of pattern recognizes. Your brains are on pattern recognition, right? And so it's like you figure that you pick that out instead of like 10 of them, and it just looks like something shattered across the playing field. So there's things like that we can do, but I think it might be a bit of a slower process for them to get into it. So that might not be all at the same time as what we're doing now. So again, it's really something we're trying to do. Even if it's a smaller scope, we're trying to do something that we can really be proud of, and like high quality. And so I can't wait to show more things in game, which is coming soon. But yeah, there's some fun stuff. But we're having a blast doing this, but we're also just conscious of like it takes a lot of hard work and focus and discipline, because we're trying to blaze a trail as we make the real stuff. And so like if we don't have a lot of time to viz dev at this point, and usually you spend a lot of time ahead like getting all the rules and the art pillars down and what the backstory is, and we're kind of like hitting it fast and furious. But I like what we're doing. The guys come up with some really awesome stuff, and I think we're building a new lore as we go, but in a very creative way. And everyone's so awesome here to work with. I came in, I knew some of the people already, but to a person, everyone's been so professional and just dedicated to like making sure this is going to be a rad game for everybody.
So wait, just going back on what you said, does that mean that the lore is changing from what we're potentially changing a little bit from what we're currently aware of?
It's more like tweaking, I think.
Okay.
But that's all I'm going to say at this point.
Valid. You said something. I was curious.
As long as it's cooler, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes there's something where like big companies might be like, we can't change that. We already put it out there. I'm like, and
but it'd be cool.
the player thinks it's cooler. Like, just do it.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about reconcepting a lot of this. The hedgehog, the Gaunt, the brute. We see these. We've had these cycling through. But I want to take a second and talk about kind of the other end of the process, because one of the things people talk about is like, okay, well, this looks like it's not far enough along. We saw tons of visual improvements with 0.1, which was the first patch after early access, and a bunch of subsequent patches that had visual changes, visual improvements that were not in the balance patch, or that were not actually in the patch notes. And as I talk about this, there was a Blizzard artist. I don't think it was you. There was someone else that worked on the StarCraft 2 team that said, hey, up until the last second, we're that final 5% polish does about as much as the 95% in terms of like making things really pop and look really good. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that part of, okay, well, we have this model, it's in the game, great, it looks like, you know, what we saw early access 0.0.0 was, and what it takes to take it from that level to something that, you know, that is a 1.0, right? That is visually popping, that looks really, really good. That is that final polishing. What goes into that?
There's a lot of stuff, and
Mhm.
getting the schedule is a big thing because
Yeah.
like a Blizzard is like almost infinite time. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I would polish things for like a long time just on my own, and you can take that for granted. But I think here we're trying to get ahead of the curve where I'm like, when it first gets concepted, like like this one, get the game view camera, like nail that down, nail the silhouette down, and so there's less to iterate on later on. Because last thing I want to do is be like, oh, this guy's kind of busy, he doesn't read very well. I'm like, well, no, we should know that when we've concepted them. Like that shouldn't be a surprise at this point. So if we do that and stick to our guns with that, then there's what's left is like the cool little things like an extra animation or
Mhm.
a super effect, or he reloads his gun or something fun like that, or he jumps out the dropship, you know, and things that enhance it more than just like, hey, then those normals are mushy, you know, let's fix it like that. That should be done already.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be very disciplined about that, but it's not always perfect, you know, as you know, with anything is um, life happens, things happen, and you know, we take something takes longer than it should, or we think it does, but if it's worth it, then we make that call.
Gotcha. Final question before I open it up a little bit. Is there any one concept, and you know, it could be something we haven't seen yet, and you say, hey, there's something I'm really excited about, but you'll see it when you see it. But is there any one concept, one idea, one thing that you've rethought, reconsidered that you are most excited or particularly excited about putting out there?
Ah, that's tough because we done some really good stuff. I
Mhm.
have to say, I think the guys have been tremendous, and I'm excited about the hedgehog right here.
Mhm.
I think the caster on the box is very unique. I want to see how the fans respond to that. And I think it's just fun because even though we're talking about being very serious and totally a little more dark, that can be an area where it's a little more almost like maybe a Harley Quinn kind of
Mhm.
uh, slight humor, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. Where she's super seductive and evil and like wants to kill everybody, but she's, you know, got a little bit of a attitude about it, a little sassy, which is kind of
Mhm.
fun. And then man, I mean, everything's the Fiend. We did a quick animation test on the new Fiend, just snuck together real quick, and even just a quick animation looked amazing. Having these guys run around, and
Mhm.
we're gonna do some stuff with the tail that has like an extra couple tails on it, so it looks like they're kind of flowing together with like shadowy, and so almost like it turns into like a shadow
Mhm.
faded out end of the tail from the front to the back. And so I guess it's like I'm kind of cheesing out and saying everything is cool right now, but and I love tech stuff. I'm a big geek.
Mhm.
I love spaceships and robots. I can just do that all day long. So there's one on here that's just a concept to show the style of robotic stuff for the more advanced look on the Vanguard, and there's still going to be, yeah, this guy here. So there's still, this is just an idea of like how the tech would look in general as a guide. And so they're still going to be war torn and gritty and all that, but just they're not the typical, you know, ragtag, rusty, you know, space humans we see in a lot of games like this. So we're trying to put our own spin on them, and so, but they're not like space gods or anything. They just
Mhm.
have higher tech, but it's still grimy and you know, grounded.
Yeah, still going through 20 years of war, but a little bit more
Yeah,
tech there.
yeah,
So actually, because you talked about the fiends, I do have a question about this. When we had the brute, not this brute, but the old version of the brute, it had two heads because you got two fiends. Right, that was kind of some of the visual idea there, as far as I could tell.
yeah.
We don't have. This is one head, and obviously, I'm assuming still two fiends are going to pop out unless maybe art does drive gameplay there. So I'm just curious about that process because again, it made sense. Two heads, two fiends. Now it's going to
Yeah.
be two fiends popping out of one head. How does that
Well,
work?
I don't want to commit on anything final
Okay.
for the design, but it sounds like they're changing that up, so it's not limited to just the two. And so once that happens, I was like, let's just take elements from this character, like the horns and the head, and make it feel like it's Like the other one has the feet that kind of look like the horns in the back here. And so we wanted to kind of split up from the back, and it turns into as many themes as we need to.
Okay.
And so it's a little more generic, a little more open-ended for the design. And then again, it's kind of trade-off. Like, hey, that takes so long to animate. We don't know if it's going to be balanced the same way, and so we'd hate to do with all the work if it just, if that makes it invalid. So we just went for like, let's spend more time just making each of the things super cool, and I think the fans will dig that.
And then that also makes sense if, say, there's a co-op hero that gives you 3 fiends per brood or whatever it is. It gives you a lot more flex. That makes a lot of sense from from the more practical applications of art perspective.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do. I mean, we can't get all hurt about like, oh, the precious thing. The idea is different. It's like, hey, what's the gameplay? It happens a lot. We change things up, but like this guy, he currently has a linear attack too deep. It's just kind of like line AOE.
Yeah.
And so we got to give him a huge talking blade, which I love, because then it's like it just looks super cool. And then wanted to be asymmetrical because that's kind of fun. And so we gave him the shoulder armor and the wrist guard, but it's not your typical stone chipped, beveled, thick fantasy type armor. It's more like this. I had this inspiration from a couple concepts I found on the line. It was like a high tech leather kind of samurai armor, kind of layered, and it's anyway. That's some inspiration I originally got after like lots of concepts into this, where it's more molded, formed, and it's because again they have a civilization, and it's not just like they're with an iron forge like, making medieval armor, and so that speaks to more how sophisticated they are. And then also he's got the lines, the Tron lines that glow for like the ruins, and I want the ruins and glyphs to be a big central factor with these guys. Like, you see the symbols, and if I have time, I'd love to make a language that very simple language of like basic elements or something, so you can kind of tie it into what they're casting. But you'll see a lot more of that stuff too, like pulsing to the body and glyphs going off when they cast spells. So the tricky part with this guy is they see the team color one on the bottom of the blue.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out, okay, red is so cool. Red and black that's inspiration, which is kind of universal for demons. But when they're blue or green or whatever, like what part of it do we keep part of red, like the red armor that's not glowing? And then it looks kind of Christmassy. And so we're trying to figure out, where that line's at. And the good thing is once you model these things, you can change it pretty easly in game. Otherwise, it's a little theoretical.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the big problems with like early versions of a lot of the units in Stormgate was like, okay, great. However you feel about the model in game, there was not enough of the team color on the models. And it was really hard to see who owned what, especially in mirror matchups. So
yeah, and I think one of the problems is it was somewhat scattered. Like you'd have some on the hand and the chest and the feet, and it was you need to consolidate more. So you have that quick read.
Yeah. And also, you're talking about this. It makes a lot of sense that there's going to have some more tech there for the same reason that, people talk about this idea that, okay, why is the first thing a human is making, why is it a big man with a sword in, a couple hundred years from now? Guns exist, right? So that idea that what you're talking about, okay, yeah, there's a little bit more high tech here makes a lot of sense. There've been eons of conquering stars, right? They're going to have a little bit more than just swords and iron swords.
Yeah, and I think also there's this old saying about like any technology advanced enough looks like magic to some people. And so yeah, having it be like it's plus magic is just a vague term if you want to. We're not gonna try and explain it like midichlorians, but it's like magic and high tech. It's like a laser that could be a laser edge blade. It could be a hellfire, whatever. Yeah. And so it's all the same stuff. And so that way it's more believable that like this guy's gonna take on a giant robot. Or a space angel, right? Versus like stone axe.
Woo! It's not even gonna dink the armor. Yeah. So, Alan, it's been about 40 minutes. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to talk to us about the art process a little bit. I'm really excited about some of this art we're seeing. But before I let you go, I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. First of all, is there anything that you came in here excited to talk about today that we have not touched upon that you would like to talk about?
There's so much I can't say just because we may or may not have time to do it. So we're always careful about not overcommitting too much. But there's a bunch of cool stuff. I'm gonna try and do this more often so we can show the community just what we're working on. And I like a small company like this is nice because to bigger companies you might be like, hey, let's do a quick little 5-minute interview to show the month's new stuff. And they're like, okay, we got to have a committee on that and talk about it and get the lawyers involved. And I'm like, never mind, we're just not doing that.
Yeah.
And so here it's like some more grassroots kind of vibe. And so I wanted to do this more often for sure, and get to jam with the community more and let them know, hey, we're working hard on cool new stuff that they should be excited about. I think one thing I can't show, but I can tell you about is we're redoing the lighting completely.
Oh, really?
And that there was, it was, we were using Unreal Engine for the first time, and I think there was some, we needed some experience with it, you know. So now we step back and look at things, and we're like, oh, you know, the things look too dark in the front, or there's not enough reflection or global illumination, and so we just finished doing that. We haven't propagated out to everything yet, but it's so much better. It's like night and day. I mean, literally, I guess it's night and day, but
that's actually really interesting because we got a big lighting pass in 0.1 that made massive improvements.
That was a quick one just to get some directional stuff, because it's always a question about, do you light from the front so you can see the units better, or do you light from the back so the terrain pops? And we went back to what we did in StarCraft, which is after, you know, a year of making that decision, like, you know, forever ago, we backlit it with any, make sure the front lighting, which is more advanced now than we ever could do in StarCraft, still lets it be readable. And we also changed up the selection circles. They were super strong before, so I toned them down a little bit. And then we did something else recently. Oh, we're playing with the camera angle.
Okay.
Just the field of view was a little wide. So I mean, it's all minor stuff, but it all adds up.
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of the 0.1.x builds, the camera angle changed by 10 degrees, and it made a massive difference in terms of how everything looked.
We're going to flatten it a little bit, because, you know, we have guys on the sides of the screen, they skew too much, and so we're going to flatten it a tiny bit. Not quite as much as StarCraft, but and then we zoomed it in a tiny bit to compensate for the FOV changing, but it's not drastic. It just, again, one more thing, it all stacks up.
Oh, absolutely. That's awesome insight, actually. So I did not expect to hear the lighting stuff was changing again, because I thought it already looked good, and now it's looking even better. So that's very exciting. But final question for you, Alan, and this is, I guess, more of a, is there anything you want to plug? You know, I know we got @PixelMage down there. Any shout outs you want to give, anything like that before we let you go back to whatever you were doing?
No, just you know, just I want the fans to know that we're working super hard, and we're dedicated to making an awesome project we're proud of. And I think we're on the track. We just have to finish doing it, getting it finished on time. And again, there's so much stuff I want to showcase later on that I think everyone's gonna love. And so we're geeked up here. I think if we're geeked up, that's gonna come through in the art.
Yeah. And you know, look, if you ever want to come on and show something off, I'm here for you. I would love to have you back and have more fun things. So absolutely love to have you back for that. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll talk to you when you next got really cool stuff to show us. How about that?
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been super fun.
All right. So that's it for this episode of Stormgate Snapshots. If you liked this, make sure to go sub to the video, because there will always be more. Hopefully we'll be talking with Monk in the new year, the Tims in the new year, getting Alan back on again. It's going to be great. So sub to the YouTube channel. Also go follow me on Twitch so you catch things live. That's always fun. Catch you next time.